The Alpha King slaughtered her pack. Then his new Luna returned, wearing their ashes. The wine hit her face before she even saw it coming. Laughter rippled through the throne room, bright and cruel. As Lady Selene Morcant lowered her empty glass with a satisfied smile, the servant girl they called Mara Vale did not flinch. She had learned long ago how to stand still while people mistook her silence for nothing at all. Alpha King Ronan Draven barely glanced up from his seat. "Take her out." A guard's hand closed around her arm, and that was the mistake. The moment his fingers touched her skin, the ash beneath it answered. Gray light split up through her veins like cracks in old stone, and the entire court gasped, as smoke began pouring from nowhere, curling upward into shapes no one in that room was prepared to see. Names, dozens of them, hanging in the air like smoke given voice. Not the names of traitors, children, healers, mothers, old wolves who had never lifted a blade against the crown. Ronan rose from his throne so fast his chair scraped against stone, his wolf recognizing a scent it had buried 12 years ago and never forgotten. The servant lifted her chin, and for the first time in 12 years, she let herself be seen. "You burned my family because someone handed you a lie. But you were the one who signed the fire." 12 years earlier, the girl standing in that court had been a child of 10, hiding beneath the ash floor of her family's shrine, while her entire pack burned above her. Voss Pack had been accused of selling border maps to enemy wolves, of poisoning royal patrols, of plotting to kill the heir to the throne. The evidence had seemed undeniable. Sealed letters bearing the Voss crest, scent trails leading straight to their land, a captured runner's confession, a stolen war map soaked in royal blood. Crown Prince Ronan Draven, given war command while his father lay dying, had looked at that evidence and made the only choice a future king seemed able to make. He signed the order. That night, the sky over Voss territory turned orange, and the howls that rose from it did not last long. Eslara's mother, Aveline Voss, dragged her into the ash shrine pit. As the roof above them began to collapse, her voice steady even as smoke poured through the cracks. "Do not let them make us nameless." Elara's father was pulled into the execution yard. Her brother tried to force open the gate so the youngest children could run. Her little sister, Leora, breathed in too much smoke before Elara could pull her down into the pit beside her. Her mother went back up once more to seal the entrance, and she never came back down. When the fire finally died, there was no pack left above her, only ash and silence, and a little girl who had survived by becoming small enough for the fire to forget. Something in her blood changed that night. Every innocent death left behind a mark beneath her skin, a streak of ash that never faded, a name she could never let herself forget. Her curse did not keep the dead alive. It kept their names from being buried under the word traitor. In the war room 12 years ago, Ronan had not wanted to sign that order. He had never taken pleasure in killing, never treated command as glory, and the letters on the table in front of him had felt like the only mercy he could offer his dying father, a swift end to a threat before it could strike first. His younger half-brother, Prince Lucien, had stood beside him that night with tears on his face, holding proof no one thought to question. "If you wait, they will kill father before dawn." Ronan had mistaken his brother's tears for proof that the grief was real. He signed the order because he believed hesitation was its own kind of death sentence. A king who waits for perfect proof may bury his people by morning. Years later, standing in a burned field with a woman whose whole world he had ended, he would hear the answer he had never let himself consider. And a king who burns without hearing may bury the innocent before midnight. After the fire, Elara did not run from the kingdom that destroyed her family. She walked straight into the heart of it, taking the name Mara Vale, and a servant's post cleaning ash from royal fireplaces and shrine bowls. No one questioned a girl who scrubbed soot from stone floors. No one remembered faces that only appeared to empty hearths and cold candles. She used the invisibility of servitude the way a soldier used cover, moving unseen through hallways where court records were kept. Listenings at doors where guards spoke carelessly, learning every patrol route the palace had. Each night, in the small ash cellar where she slept, she opened her sleeves and read the marks beneath her skin like a rosary, saying each name aloud so she would never let herself forget the sound of it. She had not returned to become a Luna. She had returned to make an Alpha King kneel before the ashes of everything he had signed away. They did not only burn our houses. They tried to make our names too dirty for anyone to mourn. The curse she carried did not answer to every death in the kingdom, only the ones dressed up as justice, while truth was left unheard. A soldier who fell in honest battle left no mark. A wolf executed after a fair trial left no mark. But an execution built on forged evidence, a massacre carried out without a hearing, a grave denied a name. Those marks bloomed on her skin like bruises that refused to heal. Gray ash meant someone punished for a crime they never committed. Red ash meant a death ordered directly by a crown. Black ash meant a child, or someone who had never carried a weapon at all. Silver ash meant someone who had tried, and failed, to warn the truth before they died. White ash meant a name that had never once been spoken since the day they died. Every time she used the curse to force truth into the open, it cost her something in return, a memory of the dead made gentler by grief, traded for one made sharper by proof. She had already begun to forget the sound of Leora's laughter, remembering instead only the sound of her coughing in the smoke. It was not a weapon built for killing enemies. It was a weapon built for names, records, and memory, and if she ever used it to punish someone without real proof, the ash itself would turn against her. Prince Ronan Draven had spent his whole life playing the gentler brother, the loyal one. The one who wanted nothing to do with a crown he insisted he never desired. It was, in truth, exactly the crown he wanted most. He understood that Ronan was loved for his discipline, his honor, his battlefield record, qualities too clean to attack directly. So Lucien built something Ronan could never undo instead. He had been selling border routes to enemy wolves for years, and when Voss Pack discovered it, he could not allow them to speak. He forged their letters. He bribed a captured runner into a false confession. He planted scent trails across their territory. He stole a war map soaked in blood and placed it exactly where his brother would find it. Then he wept in front of Ronan and called it grief. A crown is not taken from a strong king. It is taken from a guilty one. He understood that a king who believed himself responsible for a massacre would spend the rest of his reign flinching from every hard decision, and a flinching king was so much easier to guide. The dead are useful when no one is left to correct their story. When he caught the scent of old ash clinging faintly to a servant named Mara Vale, some old instinct in him went still. Back in the present, Elara let her grief outrun her caution for the first time in 12 years, and it cost someone else dearly. She noticed a trace of old ash clinging to a young royal guard named Cass Marin, who had been a trainee stationed near Voss territory the night of the massacre. Rage moved faster than proof. She let the curse mark his hands before the entire court, ash blooming dark across his skin as though he had personally lit the fire himself. Guards seized him within the hour. He was dragged to a lower cell and questioned without mercy. accused of standing among the executioners 12 years ago. Whispers followed him through every hallway after that. The ash-handed butcher, the boy who burned children and hid it behind a uniform. While the palace fixated on Cass, Lucien moved quietly in the chaos he had not even needed to create. He found the one surviving witness who could still connect him to that night. An old healer named Elara who had kept proof hidden for over a decade and made certain she never spoke again. An entire path to the truth turned to smoke before Elara even realized what her anger had cost. When Cass was finally released, hollow-eyed and shaking, he found her waiting outside the cell without an apology ready. "You hated the lie they used to kill your pack. Then you put one on my hands, because it was easier than waiting for proof." The truth, when it finally surfaced, was worse than her mistake alone. Cass had not stood among the executioners that night. He had quietly opened a side gate, letting a handful of Voss children slip into the dark before the flames reached them. Children Elara had spent 12 years assuming were simply gone. She stood in front of the man she had almost destroyed and understood, with a clarity that made her sick. That vengeance built on convenience was exactly the crime that had buried her family. Ronan did not execute her when the truth of her identity became undeniable. He also did not offer her comfort because he understood, finally, that comfort was not owed. Instead, he opened the war room records himself, searching for anything resembling a trial, a hearing, a single moment where Voss Pack had been allowed to speak before they burned. There was nothing. He walked to the flattened field where their execution had taken place, expecting some remnant of ceremony, some marker of what had been done there. He found a single plaque. Traitor Pack neutralized, no names, no children listed among the dead, no mothers, no healers, no elders. His kingdom had carved statues for soldiers who followed his order. It had left no stones for the children who died beneath it. Elara made him stand on that burned ground and listen while she spoke names into the silence, one after another, and he did not argue, did not offer the shield of having been deceived. Deception, he was beginning to understand, did not erase the weight of a signature. Lady Selene Morcant had built her entire identity on being the perfect bride candidate, and she had learned from childhood that the Voss lands her family now held were a mark of loyalty, not theft. "Choice is beautiful when your family can afford it," she might have said once, if anyone had bothered asking whether her comfort had a price attached. It was Elara, cataloging the silver in the shrine one quiet afternoon, who noticed the design of Selene's ring, old Voss craftsmanship, unmistakable even after 12 years, melted down from something stolen out of a burning temple. Selene denied it at first, furious at the implication. Because admitting the truth meant admitting her entire inheritance had been built on someone else's grave. It was only when a land transfer document surfaced, bearing Lucien's own signature dated days after the massacre, that Selene had to choose between protecting her family's fortune and telling the truth. She could have burned that document and let her family's claims stand forever. "I wore their silver because my house called it victory. I did not know victory could still smell like children's graves." She placed the document into the growing chain of evidence herself, but Elara did not embrace her for it, and did not offer forgiveness as a reward. Selene remained exactly what she was, a woman finally willing to return what was never hers, nothing more, nothing less. Cornered by mounting evidence, Lucien made his move in open court, declaring that a survivor hiding under a false name proved Voss' treachery had never truly ended. He demanded Elara's execution as proof of his brother's continued strength. He produced new evidence, freshly forged, and smiled as he delivered the words meant to break them both. He signed it, Elara. I only gave him the pen. Elara's hands burned with the urge to end him, where he stood, ash gathering at her fingertips like a blade waiting to be drawn. Ronan stopped her, not to protect his brother, but because a single act of vengeance now would let Lucien become just another story someone else could rewrite later. If we kill him before the names speak, he becomes another story someone else can rewrite. What they needed instead was something no crown, no council, and no forged signature could erase. Elara built what she called the Ash Name Chain. Proof carried not by one grieving survivor alone, but by every person Lucien had tried to silence. Cass brought his testimony of the side gate he had opened. Celine brought the land transfer bearing Lucien's hand. The old palace archivist, a quiet man named Dane, who had spent years too afraid of Lucien to speak, finally produced the forged letters he had hidden away. Mara's final testimony, smuggled out before her death, revealed Lucien's seal on the payment made to a captured runner. Elara laid Leora's burned toy and her mother's shrine ash beside them all. A name carried by one survivor could be called revenge. A name carried by witnesses became a grave no king could step over. The chain revealed a truth darker than anyone in that court wanted to hear. Voss Pack had never betrayed the crown. They had discovered Lucien selling border routes to enemy wolves and tried to send warning before it was too late. Lucien intercepted that warning himself, then built an entire massacre out of the silence he created. Desperate to keep his shrine of lies from collapsing completely, he sent men to burn the restored Ash Shrine, the one place still holding enough memory for Elara to complete a true reckoning. Leora's burned toy was stolen in the chaos, and the black ash mark across Elara's skin spread further than it ever had before. For a moment, she wanted nothing more than to burn Lucien, where he stood and be done with all of it. Ronan offered to step back and let her choose the ending herself. What do you choose? I choose the names before the blood. In the full court, with Lucien demanding her death and calling her nothing but traitor blood. Elara opened the curse completely, and ash filled the hall like a rising tide. Names rose out of the smoke, one after another. Elara Voss, a child who never reached her 10th birthday. Aveline Voss, a mother who sealed a tomb with her own hands to save her daughter. Elara Voss, a healer who tried to warn a kingdom that never listened. Toven Voss, a gatekeeper who died trying to open a path for children to run. Sarah Voss, a servant who had done nothing but serve. Old Bren Voss, an elder who had lived through 3 kings and trusted this one. An infant whose name had never once appeared in any record, spoken now for the first time in 12 years. The names kept coming, again and again, until the court stopped hearing the word traitor and started hearing people. Ash filled Elara's mouth until she could barely breathe, until for one terrible breath she could not tell whether it belonged to her family's graves or to the vengeance she had almost let herself become. Lucien laughed through his restraints, certain even now that words alone could still save him. He signed it, Elara. I only gave him the pen. Ronan stepped forward, and he did not deny a single word of it. I did not forge the lie, but I gave it teeth, fire, and a royal seal. Elara had every reason and every ability to end them both in that moment. Instead, she forced Ronan to read the names aloud himself, not as casualties, not as a traitor pack, but one by one as the people they had always been. The court listened as the dead became human again in front of them, and Lucien's forged seal burned bright through the ash, swirling around his wrists, marking him with proof no lie could argue against. He did not fall because of Ronan's anger. He fell because of the names he had spent 12 years trying to erase. In the days that followed, Ronan refused to let the blame settle only on his brother's shoulders. He walked to the execution field himself, in front of his own people, and did not soften what he had done. I did not forge the lie, but I gave it teeth, fire, and a royal seal. He admitted that Voss Pack had never received a trial. He admitted that children had been branded traitors by blood alone. He knelt on the burned ground, not as a romantic gesture toward the woman watching him, but before the dead themselves. Elara did not forgive him there. She did not owe him that, and she did not offer it. But she let the names keep coming, and she did not stop what had finally begun. The reform that followed was carved into law, rather than left to memory alone. No pack could be executed again without a public trial on record. Children could no longer inherit treason through blood. Every mass execution field would be required to list every name individually. Evidence of forged treason would reopen command accountability, rather than closing the matter with a single execution. Families of the dead would be allowed to mourn without ever again being branded traitors for grieving. No kingdom shall call the dead traitors to make the living comfortable. Elara did not take a new title because Ronan offered her a crown, and no mate bond decided it for her. The kingdom needed someone who would make certain no death ordered by a throne was ever allowed to become nameless again, and so she became known as the Keeper of Ashen Graves. Weeks later, Ronan found her standing at the edge of the burned Voss land, without guards, without a crown on his head, without the court watching either of them. The bond between them still pulsed, quiet and unclaimed, exactly as it had from the beginning. He did not reach for her. I do not ask forgiveness. Good. I ask what justice looks like when revenge is not enough. She looked out over the scorched earth that had once been her home, and answered him honestly, without performance, without softness she did not feel. Names first, then graves, then maybe one day silence. He nodded and did not press for more than that. No claim, no kiss, no wedding waiting somewhere in the wings. Only a king finally learning how to let an apology stand on its own without turning it into a demand. A month later, the field where Voss Pack had been executed no longer bore a plaque calling them traitors. It bore names instead: Elara Voss, Elara Voss, children, healers, servants, fighters, and elders, each one carved into stone exactly as they had lived. Cass placed the side gate key at the base of the memorial, a quiet mark of the lives he had managed to save. Celine returned the shrine silver herself, without ceremony, without asking to be thanked for it. Elara did not forgive her aloud. She simply let the silver be placed back where it belonged. Ronan did not stand above the gathered crowd on any dais. He stood among them, reading names alongside everyone else who had come to remember. Elara wore no Luna gown that day. She wore the same black ash cloak she had worn since the night she returned. A small child, too young to remember any of it, tugged at her sleeve and asked the question the entire kingdom had once been too afraid to answer honestly. Were they traitors? Elara knelt down to meet the child's eyes, and for the first time in 12 years, she answered without rage in her voice, no. They were people. The fire had taken their houses. The lie had taken their graves, but under Elara's watch, the ash had learned how to speak. And once a kingdom had finally heard the names it burned, it could never again pretend the smoke had been empty.